And on an upright or a grand action, there's actually two components that simultaneously propel the knuckle. This is the knuckle, right? There's the hammer. So it's two components. This is the jack, just like on an upright. And anybody know what this part's called? It's called the repetition lever. Okay, so simultaneously, do you see in that window there how the repetition lever has a little window that the jack comes up through, and both of them, both the repetition lever, like either side of the repetition lever and the jack, all three of them, but it's, I guess the repetition lever is actually one part, so both of them are actually pushing on that knuckle. Okay, and back to the upright, what's the component called, Matthew, that lets the jack off, or escapes the jack, causes the jack to escape, I guess. What's that part called?
The button?
Yeah, the let-off button. Okay, in a grand, there's also a let-off button, and it does the same thing, exactly the same thing as in an upright piano. It just trips the jack, so you can see right there. That's where the jack is tripped by the let-off button. And then you have this part here, this little screw that there's the top of the screw. That's essentially, it's called the drop screw, but it's essentially the same, it serves the same purpose as the let-off button here does for the jack. It's essentially a screw that stops the repetition lever from continuing its upward progress. So it's like a repetition lever let-off button, but it's called the drop screw.
Is that screw and the button supposed to basically touch the exact same?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. That's cool that you caught that. That's called simultaneous escapement. There's even a name for it. It doesn't really matter, but since we're on this topic, basically right here where they both touch, where this touches there and that touches there, that's where the repetition lever gets out of the way. But because the jack, it's a little bit of a process to come off the knuckle, the hammer's going to go actually a little bit higher, and that's driven entirely by the jack because the repetition lever has been stopped by the drop screw. Okay, so the additional distance, even though it's touching there, the additional distance that the hammer continues to go up, which is about a 1/16 of an inch, is the jack pulling away from the knuckle. And so what it drops down to, because the jack is now totally out of the way, is the repetition lever where it stopped when the jack initially hit the let-off button. When you're in check, right there, it's the back check.
Mm-hmm.
The back check, what it does is it holds the hammer out of the way so the jack can get back under. It's all about the jack here. It's all about the jack here. So really, the repetition lever is really just an assistant. It just assists. It holds the hammer up and out of the way so the jack can get back under. Because there again,
It can't be resting on the knuckle. The jack.
the jack can't be resting on the knuckle.
The other way around. Like in an upright, you can't have
Or
the hammer resting on the jack. That's why I associate it
Yes.
to the knuckle.
Yeah.
And in the grand, you can't have that either. You can't have the knuckle that's on the hammer resting on the jack.
Correct.
You need it to rest on the rep lever.
Okay, so, and we can simulate that quickly on this action. So right here, this hammer is not resting on the rest rail like it's supposed to. It's resting on the jack, so it'll probably fail. It works once, but then, and then, so here we have that problem there, and then watch, if I just get that under to the point where that jack, there it goes, we're good again. Okay, repetition lever serves the same purpose. It holds that hammer, the knuckle up, so the jack can get back under. So repetition lever is only lifting the knuckle by the strength of the spring, so it's spongy. Whereas the jack, it's a hard push. Like there's the only way to prevent that from lifting the knuckle is to break a certain component. Oh, I know why it's being under, because the hammer is resting on the rest rail, and that's falling under. Which on an upright, you want the shank here to rest on the rest rail.
Mm.
In a grand, you actually want it to start about a shank's width up. So it permanently lives on the repetition lever.
So it doesn't rest, so the hammer rest rail doesn't even rest on
Mm-mm.
the rest rail.
That's right.
So what's it there for?
Great question. It's really to prevent
Clicking.
this from clicking on that.
Oh, okay.
Like
Just
on a
kinda
ricochet.
silences it.
Yeah,
Plus,
that's
there's
right.
probably a pedal that brings them closer, right? The rest row, right?
Not on a grand. Yeah,
Oh, there's a pedal that moves the whole thing.
yeah. Okay, when this drop occurs when you don't hit it hard enough to put it into check. Checking is where the tail is connected with the back check here. See, if I push this away, push the back check away, it'll pop up, because these two are connected just by friction. Okay, so if I go slow enough, they don't connect. It just does its little drop thing. But if we go into check there, and I let go of this, it pops up. Why would that pop up?
Is it like
Pop.
resetting for the next motion?
So the back check's too close.
No, that's correct. That's actually good checking. But so why would it? What's actually mechanically going on when I put it into check, and then I release it and it pops up like that?
Oh, the repetition lever hasn't reached the drop.
Yes.
It's pushing
Well-
up to its.
Yes, both. Okay, so the repetition lever actually did hit the drop screw on its way up, but then the hammer ricocheted, came back down, and now it's compressing the spring on the repetition lever. So it pushed it back down. It hit the drop screw, but now that spring is, what do you call, coiled? It's like
Tense.
tensioned. And the reason that it can't push it up, unless I force it up, is because it can't overcome the friction there. Okay, so it pops up. And what it's actually popping up to is the drop screw. Okay, so if the purpose of the repetition lever is the same as the purpose of the rest rail on an upright, can you predict what would happen if the spring were too weak? Because Victoria just said that there's a range, right? Not too strong, not too weak. So,
Then you'd have a problem with the jack escaping. But it wouldn't repeat to
Why?
all the way back
Okay.
to where it needs
why
to
wouldn't
go.
it repeat?
Because it doesn't have the tension to push the repetition lever back to its highest point.
Correct. To push the knuckle to where it needs to be so the jack can get back under.
Right.
Okay, yes, that's right. I think you know what you're talking about. You just didn't get the vocabulary quite right. It's a lot of vocabulary words, like all at once. So let's see if I weaken that enough. Nope. So you can see what's going on there. It's misfiring in the same way that this is going to misfire. Okay. Come on, weaken that spring a little bit more. There we go. Okay, you see what's happening?
The repetition lever isn't coming up enough.
Correct.
So the jack's not getting back to its final resting place.
What actually happens in slow motion photography, and this was what I was talking about a minute ago, is when you're playing at a fast rate of repetition, this pop here doesn't actually happen. What actually happens is that hammer remains stationary, and the spring that, when you're doing it slowly, causes the hammer to pop up, that same spring, because it's coiled, it actually pushes the whipping down because there's not time for it to pop that hammer up, but rather the spring pushes the whipping down faster than gravity normally would, right? Yesterday I referenced 9.8 meters per second, right? Which is the rate of gravity. Everything falls at 9.8 meters per second. But have you ever like drop something and then you realize you dropped it and then you catch it, right? You're actually accelerating faster than gravity. And that's what's going on here, is it's pushing that whipping down by the spring. It's using the hammer as a counterweight so that it can push off of the hammer to get that whipping down faster so the jack can get back under. It's all about the jack. And that's why you can actually repeat faster on a grand than you can on an upright, because you have that coiled spring pushing down faster than gravity would normally accelerate it. Okay?
How are the springs attached to the actual jack?
It's different in different actions.
Sure.
Like this one, there's a little hook. There's a little
Oh, I see.
hook that attaches to a little string that comes off the back of the jack.
Okay.
And then this one, it goes into a little hole that's in the jack.
So what happens if the spring is too strong?
That's a great question. Do you remember the term for that? What you feel?
Yeah, disrespectful.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, maybe I'll explain that, what she's referring to there. Do you remember what it's called? What people refer to it as?
Oh, no, I don't, but you can, the bump?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's referred to as an objectionable bump.
objectionable bump,
Yeah.
yeah.
Meaning it just feels bad. Like you can feel,
Yeah, when
okay,
you press it like very lightly, you can actually feel a bump in your finger when it's too
Yes.
strong.
Oh.
That's
And
the
it's-
objectionable
and
bump.
it's objectionable. Okay, so if I just strengthen the spring a little bit more, let's see if we can, yeah, well, and another thing that can happen is if it's really strong and what's happening on this one is that hammer can rise so fast that it actually strikes the string again. That's even worse. But if it's just a little bit too strong, then this right here, you can feel it in the front of the finger. Do you wanna, anybody
I
wanna
guess we
try it?
call it objectionable because at times
So put it
when
into check
you've been
and
trying
then,
for
and then
hours
slowly
on it,
release it.
there's an acceptable bump.
Well, but it's so faint
Yeah.
that you can't really feel it,
Yeah, because I remember I was working for hours on the springs
Yeah.
on that action,
right?
and at one point you were like, "There is a bump, but it's not objectionable. Just leave it."
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It comes back up right after it's in check. It'll come straight back up.
So can anybody guess if you're going to err on one side or the other of too strong or too weak? Can you guess what side you'd want to err on?
Too strong.
Okay, too strong.
If we're erring on the side.
Yeah, if you're going to err on one side or the other.
Too strong.
Too strong. Why?
Because if it's too weak, then the repetition lever is never gonna make it to where it needs to go in the right
It's
amount of
like
time.
work.
Okay.
So we have one side.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
The jack won't get back up. The
Yeah,
knuckle.
if it's too weak, well, okay, let me start with, if it's too strong, well, worst case scenario, you get a double strike.
Mhm.
That's bad. But generally, I mean, that has to be really extreme to get a double strike like I had it there a second ago. But worst case scenario generally is you get an objectionable bump that most people aren't gonna necessarily feel. They might think it's kind of weird, but whatever, it plays just fine.
Funny piano.
Yeah, funny piano, great way to put it. Whereas if you err on the side of too weak, you have catastrophic failure, meaning the note doesn't even repeat, and people are going to play it, and suddenly they're going to get misfires, and so it doesn't even work. So a lot of pianos that come straight from the factory, they are overly strong.